great to be able to welcome on our screen today Dr. Todd Johnson, who's going to teach us about numbers in relation to migration and what that tells us about global Christianity. And then we're going to have a bit of time for some conversation. I think the microphone seems to be working pretty well in the room, and Dr. Johnson can hear whatever you say. So there will be an opportunity for discussion and conversation. And I know you're joining us on screen, Anish, so we can hear you too as well. So I'll hand over to you now, Todd, to lead us, and then we'll see where the discussion takes us. But great to have you with us.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Todd Johnson. I'm co-director of the Center for the Study of Global Christianity, which is located in Boston at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And we basically produce reference books on Christianity in every country of the world. We have encyclopedias, atlases, multi-volume series trying to describe what's happening around the world. And as you can imagine, migration plays a pretty significant role, which is why I'm here with you. So I'm going to share my screen and just talk to you for a few minutes, long enough for us to have some ideas to talk about together. So here's my presentation. And going from here, let me just explain a few things, okay? So let's actually talk about global Christianity first, and then we'll get into migration and some studies. Global Christianity, in one sense, hasn't changed very much over the last 120 years. It's been about a third of the world's population. This is the demographics, the number of Christians in the world. So in one sense, it doesn't look very interesting because it seems like it's just in stasis almost. But there's been a terrific shift in Christianity, which I'm basically saying is very relevant to the subject of migration. I think it is the single most important thing that you can identify as a Christian in relation to migration. So here it is, 1900, 82% of all Christians are Europeans, or Europeans in North America, we could say, in the global north, with much smaller populations in the south, only 18% in the global south. So in one sense, Christianity is a European religion and had been for about 1,000 years. So that's 1900. Here is the year 2020. Now there's only 33% of all Christians in the global north, Europe and North America. And instead, as you can see here, 2/3 of all Christians are in the global south. So maybe the first thing is as we think about migration, we're really not talking about a Western religion, a Northern religion. We're talking about a global religion with the vast majority of Christians in the south. A graph makes it look like this. This is what most people refer to as the shift of Christianity to the global south, profound shift. And this is what I wanted to put in front of you as we think about migration, okay? Then there's all these different Christian traditions around the world. These are the big categories: Catholic, Independent, Orthodox, Protestant. And you can see, depending on where you are, this is the majority tradition in each place around the world. We actually count 45,000 Christian denominations in the world. So that's another aspect of Christianity. Then we have the languages, the mother tongues of Christianity, and the top 5 are pretty interesting in relation to our subject today. So the number 1 mother tongue of Christians in the world is Spanish. And this isn't because of Spain, it's because of Latin America, as you can imagine. And the number 2 mother tongue is English, and that, of course, is represented in many different places in the world. This would be English as a mother tongue, not as a second language, because obviously many people speak English as a second or third or fourth, fifth language. Number 3 is Portuguese, and this, of course, is not little Portugal, but big Brazil that is behind this. And number 4 is Russian. It's the size of the Russian Orthodox Church, because we're talking about all Christians, all kinds here. And then maybe the biggest surprise, and this is in 2020, is Mandarin Chinese is the 5th largest mother tongue of Christians in the world. So that shift to the global south is evident here. And as you go down the list, you run into the European languages, but they're moving down while languages from the global south are moving up. So even in language, we see how important this is. I also felt it's important to say something about the Middle East in relation to this, since migration is so profound in this area. We wrote an article called "The Ongoing Exodus: Tracking the Emigration of Christians from the Middle East." And this is a big problem in that in 1900, about 13% of all people in the Middle East were Christians. That's fallen to about 4.2% by 2020. And it could be well below 3%, perhaps even 2% by 2050. And this is largely the result of emigration, as we said in the title. So this is something important in relation to our subject that has to be put in front of us. And many of my colleagues here in Boston, academic from other religious backgrounds, wonder why American Christians in particular have so little interest in Christians in the Middle East. And that's something we'll talk about in a minute, I guess. Then let's bring this into conversation with our subject for today: diasporas, migrants, and the displaced. And part of the reason that I'm talking to you is that I was part of 2 studies done in 2012. This is the first one: Migration, Religious Diasporas, and Religious Diversity, a Global Survey, which was in Mission Studies. And the other one was done by the Pew Research Center, who I work closely with, and they did a study on the religious affiliation of migrants, of international migrants. So religion is an important aspect of migration. I think you're probably quite well aware of that. Now, the big numbers behind this is that we, in talking about diasporas, identified about 860 million people in 327 different groups in diaspora. And you can see on this chart, or this map, I should say, this is from The Economist, that they are mapping 2 of the largest of the diasporas, the Chinese diaspora and the South Asian diaspora, showing where people are around the world. Which is 12.5% of the global population, that people are living in countries outside of their homeland. That's the definition of diaspora. Whereas 214 million people, about 3% of the global population, are living outside of the country that they're born in, okay, which is a different thing. So let me just give you an example. For example, Pew identified 75,000 Armenians who were born in Armenia but were living in the United States. So they're migrants. They're away from the country in which they were born. But in diaspora in the United States, there's 1 million Armenians. That's because they've been coming for decades and decades. They were not born in Armenia. They're born in the United States. So migrants generally increase the size of diasporas as more and more people come. So these are 2 different ways of looking at migration. One is, who are the people that are currently on the move? And the other is, how have communities built up over time? That's the connection between these. And what's going to be interesting, I hope, to you is that our findings were quite similar in one profound sense. Okay, and that profound sense is that the vast majority of people on the move are either Christians or Muslims. And this would be people that have built up in diaspora, So this says that, Christians are about a third of the world's population, but almost half of all people in diaspora are Christians. And then we have 22% of the world that's Muslim, but 25% of all people in diaspora are Muslims. So just think about that for a minute. The host countries, when it comes to diaspora, are the United States and India, with almost half of all religious diasporas. And the sending countries into these diasporas are Mexico, Bangladesh, Argentina, China, India. Maybe not surprising, okay? So those are people that are on the move and are going to different countries than what they were born in over a long period of time. Okay, now Pew showed that more and more people are on the move, from 77 million going to a country outside of where they were born, sort of current migrants, as we would say, all the way to 214 million by 2010. But you'll see the graph on the right shows that this is about 3% of the world's population. By the way, in early 1900, 10% of the world's population was on the move. So this is a phenomenon that we see over time. The countries of origin here of migrants. For Christians, the main source is Mexico. For Muslims, the Palestinian territories, and so on. You can see in the map here. The top destinations are a little bit similar to the diasporas, and the USA is the top destination for Christians, for Buddhists, for unaffiliated, and number 2 for Hindus, number 2 for Jews, number 7 for Muslims. Okay, so we have people going from one place to another place, and this is the first time that anyone had just determined what the religious makeup of migrants was. That's what these 2 studies did back in 2012. Okay, and here's the religious composition of migrants. I showed you diasporas earlier, and you see again, a third of the world's population is Christian, but almost half of all migrants are Christians. And here, 27%, which is much bigger than the Muslim proportion of the world's population. So again, the vast majority of Christian migrants of migrants or of diasporas are Christian and Muslim. Okay, so that's maybe the main thing that I wanted to put in front of you. And then people who are in outside of their own country, Jews are the largest percentage of the total number of Jews in the world. 25% of all Jews are outside of where they were born. Christian, it's about 5%, and the global average is 3%. So both Christians and Muslims are a higher proportion than other religions. So those are those studies that were done about 10 years ago. Then there's the report that you heard about early in this meeting that came out last week on global trends. So I'll just mention these in passing so we can get into a conversation here. This is a graph showing how displacement is increasing over time, different kinds of displacement. And so this is a growing issue or problem that requires attention. Most people don't leave their country. They're displaced within their country. You heard that earlier on. Sudan has almost 9 million people, or over 9 million people, who are displaced, and then Syria and the DRC, also very large numbers. And then refugees are those that manage to get outside of their country, Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine are all mentioned here. And this number has been growing over time. And then the countries hosting the most refugees, Turkey, where I was just 2 days ago, hosts more refugees than any other country. And then Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, Germany. Actually, this list is mainly Christian or Muslim countries. So the hosts are mainly Christians or Muslims. And then the highest density, which is, per 1,000 people, is Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey. Again, not in Europe somewhere, but Sweden is the highest one in Europe, but most of it's Africa or Western Asia. So that gives you some idea of where people are being hosted and where the density is the highest. Then one other thing I wanted to put in front of you is, when Christianity was mainly located in Europe, then Christians did not experience much diversity, much religious diversity, because most everybody was a Christian. Most places, let's say 120 years ago. Today, Christians live in much more religious diversity, and migration is part of that reason. The spread of Christianity outside of Europe, of course, is important as well. As I wrap up, because I want to give some time for discussion, I used to live in Singapore a couple of times, and I was reading the newspaper one day, and it said Singaporeans, 9 out of 10 Singaporeans say they're comfortable living and working with people in other religions or other ethnicities. And back in the United States, it's 1 out of 10, or maybe 2 out of 10. And I thought, if you were trying to learn something about living with people from different backgrounds, maybe it'd be best to read Singaporean Christians, in this case, helping us to understand that. And Christians and Muslims, who I've highlighted here, were only a third of the world's population together in 1800, and will be very likely 2/3 of the world's population before we reach the 22nd century. And so maybe that's one of the main things I wanted to put in front of you is, what is the Christian-Muslim relationship to migration, and how are we going to navigate that? And then another piece of research that's pertinent is that we've uncovered the fact that 87% of all Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists do not personally know a Christian. So that's yet another piece of our understanding of migration. And then finally, I'll end with this, that for me, the most important thing in relation to migration, both toward Christians of other backgrounds, as we've seen, the vast majority are from the Global South, and for people of other religions, we don't discriminate, and we offer hospitality and friendship as a major way in which to deal with these demographic changes. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to give us some things to talk about. So I'll stop sharing, and any questions or comments from the group, either in the room there or online, are much welcome.
Maybe I could begin with a question, and then give everyone time to kind of gather some thoughts. I wonder whether you have any sense of the impact that the migration, thinking particularly of Christians, is having on the declining existing church in some of those places where migration is taking place, or in countries where, I don't know, maybe Christianity is thriving and migrants are going there. Do you have any sense of the, how integrated that is, sort of what impact that's having on existing Christian communities?
Yeah, well, that's really one of the most important aspects here in the United States, which makes it deeply ironic that Christians who are saying that they're, distressed about the decline of Christianity are actually trying to keep people out who could offer, part of the solution to the decline, and that being especially Christians from Latin America who have already shown to be reviving the Catholic Church in the United States, filling a lot of vocations and writing about their Christian faith, and holding rallies. And the same is true of Pentecostals, actually. because Pentecostalism is so strong in Latin America. Pentecostals that are coming to the United States are offering a lot of new life to the churches in the United States. So it's really deeply ironic that the people who want to see the United States be more Christian are actually trying to keep out people who would definitely have a lot to offer. And this would refer to not just Latin Americans, but Africans and Asians. And this is true, and for Europe as well. The African diaspora and migrants that are in Europe are really do have a lot to offer to Europe in relation to Christianity. And they're the majority. This is what I'm trying to say, is that the people in the global north shouldn't be making all the decisions about how to handle migration. And it doesn't make any sense for people who have difficulty welcoming the stranger to be leading global Christianity. That's not helpful or right. When most cultures around the world in the global south are much more hospitable in the first place. So I think we need to see that characterize who we are more than let's say wealthy northerners trying to protect their interests, which isn't a Christian thing at all. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Just wondering if anyone in the room's got anything to comment on that before we go to, there's a question in the chat.
You just use the phrase there, wealthy northerners, which we obviously are. What should we be doing with our wealth then in order to progress the gospel into all the world, but also to help with migration, which is our subject of today?
Yeah, I think that, no, that's great. And I think that's where that's where I think you know, the future is exciting for Northern Christians, because there's so many ways that we can partner with Christians of the global South, where they're actually you know, telling us what sort of things really need to happen. And this, I mean, this is true in the development world. Most good development professionals have realized that it's really best to listen first, and then to work in partnership. And I think this is happening all over the world, and I think that's the hope that we have. I think Christians in the global South can just help us, those of us in the North, to you know, to figure out how we can be helping without hurting, as one famous book puts it. So I see that, but I think you can't do that unless you have friendship and are able to really listen and have true partnerships. So I think that's the future in relation to this subject.
Thank you, Todd. There's a question in the chat from Anna saying, can you talk about migration and conversions?
Yes. Yeah, I think migration offers, from the standpoint of Christianity, let's say Christians who are migrating, when we're studying the growth of the church around the world and decline in some places, and what we've seen is that when new Christians come into an area, it offers another cultural version of Christianity, or you know, where there's maybe different strengths than people have seen in the Christians that have been living there for a while, and that does often lead to, you know, people who might not have considered Christianity before actually becoming involved. And in one sense, you know, the more variety there is in Christianity, cultural variety, the less it's associated with a single religion, single culture or nation. And that's really who we are. I mean, we're very diverse around the world, thousands of languages, ethnicities, And I think when people see that, when I was working in Thailand in the Cambodian refugee camps, I was the only American on the team. It was Filipinos and Malaysians and South Africans. We were very diverse. And I'll never forget one of our Cambodian hosts said to us, "Who are you people? Where are you from? How can you, what are you representing that it's so diverse with people from so many places around the world?" And that was part of our witness, that we didn't belong to one nation. And I think that's where this pushes back against the idea of nationalism, Christian nationalism, or otherwise, that our diversity is one of our greatest strengths. So migration increases diversity even in the Christian community. And I think it helps Christians who are struggling with their own faith to see how other Christians and other cultures are navigating and sharing these, sharing the what they've learned. So I think that's part of how it goes forward.
Thank you, really, really helpful. Another question in the chat, some very encouraging comments from Anish, who's enjoyed your presentation, but he wanted to hear more about the US and India as host countries in particular. Do you have anything more?
Yeah, so the US is a host country for diasporas because it's a nation with a history of immigration, essentially. And while there's assimilation, there's also identifiable ethnic groups, even from Europe, from the last century or even last 2 centuries, as well as immigration from all over the world, creating, first migrant communities, then diasporic communities. And I think India has a large number because of independence in 1948, and the fact that this methodology looks at homelands from the standpoint of modern countries, and so people that grew up in Bangladesh who are now in India, or communities that came across a long time ago, count as diaspora communities. So maybe that's a little strange, but in trying to keep consistent across the whole world, India hosts many different groups from surrounding countries and from farther away as well. So so India is one of the top host countries in that sense. And if you got a hold of our article, I'm happy to send it to you. You'd see some of the examples that I'm referring to.
Thank you. Another question in the room here.
Thanks very much for a very good presentation. I like the fact that you mentioned that Christians migrating rejuvenates and brings perhaps a different cultural perspective to Christianity that's in the host country. I'd like to address the question of people who convert through migration to Christianity, so Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, who even when they're in the West suffer persecution because Christianity is still seen as a white man's religion. How can we, as converts, first-generation converts from Hindu, Muslim, Sikh backgrounds, find places where our cultural Indianness, or our cultural Hinduness, if you want, as a cultural identity, can contribute to the way theologies seem to be still Western-based? You've still got short-term missions going to places like India, taking baseball hats and all these sort of things that firmly then swing Christianity back to a Western perspective. And so the challenge for us here is we're still fighting the same battles of conversion. Indians are suffering more, as you can see with people like Modi. It's just making it more and more difficult. So how can we get that, even though we know the center has shifted to the majority world, how can we shift the thinking that's still sort of got us trapped, where I'm using my white privilege of a British accent and a British education and being part of the problem, as it were?
Yeah, no, I think that's the question of the day. As somebody who studies global Christianity, this is really the most important thing, and it affects how we deal with migration. So I think you're exactly right that this is absolutely critical, and I don't see how it can happen without more personal contact and friendship. I mean, we have a terrible gap between Christians and Muslims, for example, a personal contact gap. And all the research shows that in the United States, that is, that Christians who do not know Muslims have deeper amounts of fear and trepidation when it comes to the whole Muslim community. As soon as you have one friend, your perspective changes. And I think the same principle is true within Christianity. So I feel like this is one way in which migration will help the West to break free of a over-contextualized gospel that has even been forgotten. Like in my library, or behind me, in the other room is a Western library, and when white people write theology, their book is in the theology section. When African writes theology, it's between mythology and feminism. So in other words, they have some kind of interesting perspective, whereas white people have no perspective. They simply just write, and that has to be undone. But I feel like it's, you know, personal relationships that help untie that. Because it's, as you say, it's so ingrained in our churches. But I've seen over and over how someone from a different background has helped to broaden horizons. And I think that's the way forward. It's tough. It's not really fair to the, you know, like you say, the communities that are converting, first generation communities, to be put in this position. But on the other hand, the future of Christianity depends on everyone recognizing that they have perspective and that they need to learn from everyone else. So I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. And I've seen it happen in person over and over again. If you really, you know, if you really know people and you have people in your home and you're in their home, things are going to change. So hopefully that's one key to the way forward.
Thank you. And I think your comment was, yeah, very, very interesting. I guess from a working in a theological college perspective, as I do, and based here at St. Mellitus, it is that question of what's on people's reading lists and on people's shelves is a really important question, as, you know, training up next generation of leaders in the churches, and actually where are, you know, the voices coming. The bookstall up there is absolutely fantastic, isn't it? Of, you know, the breadth of voices on there that you just wouldn't get in most theological libraries today. So I think that's a very helpful point you raise about kind of reading lists of libraries from an academic perspective at least. Any other questions, or you want to come back on that at all? We've got a couple more minutes before dinner.
One question I had, we're going through some training at the moment, and the phrases that we're using is that we want to go from multicultural to intercultural. Have you got any thoughts around that, and any kind of gems to give us on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually, you know, a follow-up to what we're just talking about. And I had an experience. I'll just share this with you. I was at the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation in Wittenberg, Germany in 2017. And I had research with me that we had just done showing that in 2017, 42% of all Protestants in the world were Africans. Now, there were 100 people in the room and about 6 Africans. And so we weren't really representing Protestantism, even there in Germany. And finally, one person from the front of this little conference said, "We want Africans to know that they're welcome at the table here at this meeting." And sitting next to me was a Ghanaian Christian, well-respected Ghanaian Christian, who leaned over to me and a couple of us there, and he said, "We have a proverb in Ghana. It's good for you to welcome me to the kitchen. Excuse me, it's good for you to welcome me to the table, but it's better if you welcome me to the kitchen." And I think that's what we're talking about is there's that's multiculturalism in a sense, is Western people welcoming the rest of the world to a set table. But I think when everybody gets into the kitchen, it's going to be chaotic, but that's where things really change. And what we need is that kind of an approach with Christian theology, biblical studies. You know, there's nothing that we do that's done without perspective. And so we gain a lot by having everybody in the kitchen, everybody involved in setting the menu, to use that metaphor. So I think that again is where we can make progress.
Okay, anyone else? One more question, perhaps?
I don't even think this is a well thought through question. I think your final slide said 2/3 of population or global population will be Christian and Muslim. Did I read that? Am I reciting that part correctly? If not, correct that part. But my question is around the politics of that. I'm sitting in here with the politics hat on, and at the moment, the politics of how we talk about both religious groups is not great. And if those are the two emerging religious identities around the world, I'm just a bit worried about what that means for our political conversation, discourse, particularly when migration is a part of that conversation. So first, correct me if that was the right stat, and just any reflections around the politics of this going forward.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Yes, it is correct. We're approaching 60% now. We'll soon hit 66%. Christianity is growing largely through conversion, but also through larger families, especially in Africa. And Islam is growing mainly through larger families. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's why these two are continuing to take up more and more of the whole. And I think for me that, the lesson from this is how important the relationship is between the two. But here's the irony, is that because Christianity was over-identified with Europe for so long, that much of the Christian-Muslim relations is actually the West and Islam, the West and Arabs even. And ironically, as you saw, the vast majority of Christians are not from the West today. And actually, the vast majority of Muslims aren't Arabs either. So I'm interested in the next phase of our relationship, which is a global community interacting with another global community. And I mean, I just spent a month in Uzbekistan and Turkey, and I got to interact with many Muslims who are thinking very differently about this relationship between Christians and Muslims, and many Christians, the small community of believers in both of those countries, how they think about their role in the future of Christianity. And I think it's exciting. I think we can move past the tired politics that doesn't actually represent either Christianity or Islam, and really see some progress in that relationship. So personally, I want to work on that, but I appreciate that. I think it's part of what it means for us to all grow more adept with navigating diversity and in our own community and into other religious communities. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Todd. One quick practical question before we draw to a close, which is in the chat. Is if people want to do further reading around migration and mission, themes like that, where do they start? Is there a reading list somewhere? There's some suggestions of where to go?
Yes, yeah. In fact, fortunately, there's a relatively new book called oh dear, the title is, I think, Migration and Mission. It's Jehu Hansiles, Hanciles, who is an African scholar who is in the United States as a professor. And his book is just full of great resource material, all the latest books and articles that he used to write that masterful book. So we're grateful to him to now have this book. And I think that's a great starting place, because the reading list beyond that is definitely found there. And then, of course, all the people you've heard today have written books more about, you know, how we treat migrants from a biblical point of view, and those are also very important. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to those of you who joined us online. It's been great to have you with us, and we're very grateful for your stimulating input, and much to discuss over our dinner, which you're probably having breakfast or something now, are you? I don't know what time it is for you, but it's dinner time for us. So thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you. Bless you.